Good morning! Happy Easter! He has risen! What a wonderful reason to celebrate this morning. Before we get into our new lesson, let's go ahead and review from the first lesson that we just had, where we had the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And that was where we ended. Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross. Now, Jesus was crucified the day before Passover Sabbath. And it was Jewish custom that no dead bodies stay on the cross during that time. So the guards were kind of in a hurry to get those bodies down off the cross. And that's where we pick up our lesson. So the guards have taken the bodies down off of the cross. And there was a man there, his name was Joseph of Arimathea. And he goes to Pilate and he asks for Jesus's body. And he asks for his body so that he could give it a proper burial. Pilate agrees, and he orders the body of Jesus to be handed over to Joseph. Joseph was a new follower of Jesus, but he was also a secret follower because Joseph was a rich man in the area. He was very well known among the leaders of the community, and he was afraid that if they learned he was a follower of Christ, he was afraid of what might happen to him and his family. And Joseph had some help taking care of the body. He had some help from a man named Nicodemus. And Nicodemus was also a new follower of Christ, and he was also a secret follower, probably for the same reason that Joseph was, because he was afraid of what would happen if the leaders in the community found out that he too followed Christ. So they take Jesus' body and they carry it over to Joseph's land. Joseph owned some land that was not far from the hill. And on his property, he had a big tomb. We can guess maybe it was a tomb that he meant for his family, but he wanted to use that tomb for Jesus. So Joseph and Nicodemus carry Jesus' body over to this tomb. And that's where they get ready to prepare the body. And in Jesus' time, they used oils and herbs and spices and perfumes to preserve bodies. And they took fine linen cloth and they dipped it in all of those oils and spices, and they wrapped his body nice and tight. And then Joseph took a fine linen napkin and he gently placed it over his face. When the men were finished, they stepped outside and they rolled that big stone in front of the door, and then they left. They were done. That was how they preserved his body. Can you imagine how sad they must have felt as they left after having taken care of their friend's body? Pilate was a smart man, and Pilate ordered 2 soldiers to stand guard outside of the tomb. Because Pilate remembered hearing Jesus say that 3 days later, he was going to rise again. And Pilate didn't want Jesus' disciples going and stealing that body and claiming then that he rose again. So he ordered 2 guards to stand watch outside of the tomb just to make sure nobody came and stole that body. But guess what? No one had to come and steal that body. Because guess what happened? That's right. Early that Easter morning, before the sun even came up, Jesus rose from the dead. The Bible tells us that an angel of the Lord came down, rolled that stone away, and then sat on top of it. Now the Bible doesn't tell us a whole lot of description of what happened, but I'm just going to kind of close my eyes and imagine that at that time, Jesus just sat up. And when the angel opened that tomb, he just walked out. And that's it. That's all that happened. But the Bible tells us that there was a bright, dazzling light. The angel's clothes shone like lightning, and his clothing was bright white. His face radiated light. The Bible tells us that the guards were so afraid, so shocked, that they passed out. Actually, the book of Matthew tells us that they became like dead men because they were so afraid. And after they woke up and they discovered what happened, They ran back into town to tell the leaders that Jesus was alive and that an angel came to them. And the leaders knew that this could be a problem. So the leaders bribed the soldiers to tell a lie. They bribed the soldiers to tell people that while they were sleeping, the disciples came and they stole Jesus' body. But the soldiers knew no one was going to believe that, especially after once they actually saw Jesus. Later that same morning, maybe right around sunrise, we can guess. We really don't know. So maybe right around sunrise, we have 3 women that go to the tomb. We have Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of James, and Salome. Now, they were bringing more spices, more perfumes to put on the body. In our day, when somebody dies, sometimes we take them flowers, or we might make them food, we might take them a meal, and that's just how we help the grieving process. Well, in Jesus' time, they would continue to go and grieve and put more spices and oils on the body. And so that's what these 3 women were going to do. And they were talking on their way to the tomb as they left town. We don't know what they were talking about, but we can maybe imagine they were talking, maybe they didn't sleep well the night before. Jesus had just died. They loved him, and now he's gone. They're going to miss him. So maybe they were talking about that. But I bet that they were talking about one thing in common. When they get to the tomb, how are they going to open it? Okay, there's this big stone in front. How are they going to move that so they can get inside? Can you imagine their shock and surprise when they get to the tomb and it's already open? I bet they just run right up to it. And they realize and they see Jesus' body is gone. So Mary Magdalene, she stops what she's doing and she runs as fast as she can back to town, probably to get a disciple, maybe Peter, to get somebody and tell them what happened. But right after Mary Magdalene leaves, an angel of the Lord appears at the tomb to Mary, mother of James, and Salome. We don't know if it's the same angel that was with the guards or if it's a new one. We don't know. But the angel looks at the women and says, "Why are you searching for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen, just like he said he would. Do you not remember? Jesus said that he must die, but that he's going to rise again on the 3rd day. Go now and tell the disciples and Peter what you have seen, that Jesus is alive, and that you're going to get to see Jesus again." How cool, how exciting. The Bible says the women were filled with joy and they ran back to town to tell the disciples. Now, it's early in the morning. Maybe the disciples were having breakfast, getting ready to start their day, and the women show up and they're breathless. They had just been running, so they might be breathless, gasping for air, thirsty, and they're excited. Their adrenaline is running, and they're trying to tell this story, tell them what they saw, and the disciples maybe calm down. Okay, take a breath, have some water, tell us what happened. And they tell the disciples, "We've seen it. We've seen the empty tomb. An angel of the Lord met us there, came to us and said, Jesus is alive, and we're going to get to see him again." Well, after the women arrived, 2 disciples leave, John and Peter, who probably had already heard from Mary Magdalene that the tomb was empty. And John arrives first before Peter. And when Peter arrives, both men go into the tomb, and they noticed that the linen cloths that were wrapped around the body are still perfect. They're still in the shape of the body. They're not cut, they're not torn, they're not unraveled. They're perfect just the way they were wrapped around the body. And John notices that the napkin that was covering Jesus' face is neatly folded and placed right where the head was. And that told John a couple things. That told John, one, that this body was not stolen and it has not been moved, because thieves would not take the time to carefully unwrap the body. They would cut through those cloths and take the body. So that told John that this body was not moved and that Jesus really was alive. How right after them. We don't know how much longer, and we don't really know exactly when, but we know that at some point, Mary Magdalene arrives back at the tomb. She missed the angel appearing to the women, and she missed the message with the disciples that Jesus was alive. So Mary Magdalene is still grieving. She's sad. She still thinks that Jesus is missing. She thinks somebody stole his body. So she's at the tomb. She's crying, and an angel of the Lord appears to her, and the angel says, "Why are you crying? Why are you sad?" And she says, "Oh, something happened to my Lord. His body is moved, it's missing, and I don't know what happened." While she's talking to the angel, she hears a rustling sound behind her. And she turns around and she sees a man. And she assumes it's the gardener. She doesn't recognize the man. And this man says to her, "To whom are you looking for? And why are you crying?" And so she repeats, "Oh, my Lord is missing. Something happened. Please, sir, are you the one who took him and moved his body? If you did that, could you please tell me where you hid him, and I will go get him?" Well, that wasn't the gardener that Mary had behind her. And she didn't know who it was. And the man said one word to her. He said, "Mary." He said her name. And as soon as Mary heard her name, she knew that was Jesus Christ. She knew that he wasn't missing, that he was alive, and that he was with her there in the garden. How cool, how exciting. What a reason to celebrate. And we know now that he's still alive. He's sitting at the right hand of the Father in heaven, waiting for us to get there. The Bible tells us that Jesus spent 40 days on the earth after his resurrection and before he ascended into heaven. He spent 40 days on earth. Most of those days were spent with his disciples. Some of them he spent with large groups of people. Some of them he met with individuals. He showed them his hands. He showed them his feet, that he was nailed to the cross, that he rose again on the third day, just like he said he would. Before he left his disciples, he left them one thing to do. And this is what he told them. Are you ready? He said, "Go and tell them, I want you to teach them all these marvelous, comforting truths that you have learned. Start at home, here in Jerusalem. Go a little farther into Judea. Spread out even more into Samaria. And yes, I want you to go to the farthest corners of the earth and tell them this good news." And this good news is that Jesus is alive. He's risen. And if we accept Jesus as our personal Lord and Savior, we will get to be with him in heaven one day. Isn't that so exciting? That is a reason to celebrate. Before we leave, I have a few questions for you. I want to see how well you were listening. Are you ready? Question number 1. What are the names of the 2 men who took Jesus and put him in the tomb? Number 2. Why did Pilate assign 2 guards to stand outside of Jesus' tomb? Number 3. What happened to the soldiers when Jesus rose from the dead? Number 4. When the women came to visit Jesus' grave after the resurrection, what did the angel say to them? Number 5. What proofs of the resurrection did John see in the tomb that convinced him that Jesus was alive and that the body was not stolen? And number 6, how did Mary Magdalene recognize that the man in the garden was Jesus and not a gardener? Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here this morning. I hope you have a great day celebrating our risen Savior with your family. Bye.